in the heart of an old African village, where the sun kissed the earth and the rivers sang melodies of life. Two young girls, Amina and Sade, were the pride of their families. They were beautiful, intelligent, and had dreams as vast as the open sky. Their parents, though not wealthy, worked tirelessly to send them to school, believing that education would pave the way for a better future. But as time passed, the simple life of the village no longer excited Amina and Sade. The stories of the city's bright lights, endless parties, and carefree life filled their minds. The village elders often warned, a bird that leaves its nest too soon may not survive the storm. But the girls laughed, convinced that they were meant for bigger things than the quiet life of the village. One evening, a group of rich, flashy young men from the city arrived in the village. They drove expensive cars, wore gold chains, and spoke of a world beyond the fields and huts, a world of music, dance, and endless pleasure. "You girls are wasting your beauty here," one of them smirked. "Come with us, and we'll show you what real life is." Amina's heart raced. The thought of leaving the dusty village behind for the glittering city was too tempting. Sade hesitated, but when Amina grabbed her hand and whispered, "This is our chance to escape poverty," she nodded. That night, without telling their parents, they packed their clothes and sneaked away, chasing the dream of a glamorous life. As they entered the city, their eyes widened at the towering buildings, neon lights, and the constant rhythm of music from clubs. For the first time, they felt free dancing under flashing lights, drinking expensive wine, and laughing without a care in the world. Days turned into weeks. The men who had brought them treated them like queens, buying them jewelry, designer dresses, and the latest phones. But slowly, things began to change. The men who once showered them with gifts grew distant. The money stopped flowing. The girls, who once lived in luxury, now had to find ways to survive on their own. When Amina asked one of the men why things had changed, he laughed coldly. "Nothing in this world is free. You wanted this life, now you must pay for it." Desperate to maintain their lifestyle, Amina and Sade made dangerous choices. They lied, borrowed, and even stole to afford food and rent. They started working at clubs, first as dancers, then as something much worse.
One night, after a long shift, they were walking home when an old woman with piercing eyes appeared before them. "My daughters, BS," he said. "A river that forgets its source will dry up. Turn back before the darkness swallows you whole." Amina scoffed. "We don't need advice from an old beggar." But Saw felt a chill run down her spine. The woman's eyes held a strange power, as if she could see the future. Ignoring the warning, they laughed and walked away. But from that night, their lives took a terrifying turn. Amina woke up the next morning feeling dizzy and weak. She looked in the mirror. Her once flawless skin was covered in sores, her eyes sunken and lifeless. Saad tried to comfort her, but she too began to see strange shadows lurking in the corners of their apartment. Every time she tried to sleep, whispers filled the room. The glamorous life they had chased had turned into a nightmare. One night, as they sat in their tiny, dimly lit room, a loud knock shook the door. It was one of the men who had first brought them to the city, but his face was no longer friendly. It was cold, demanding. "You owe us," he said darkly, "and debts must be paid." Terrified, they realized they were trapped. They had no money, no friends, and no way out. In a desperate attempt to escape, they fled into the night, running through dark alleys, barefoot and scared. But the city that once welcomed them with open arms now felt like a prison with no exit. At dawn, exhausted and broken, they found themselves at the edge of their village. Their clothes were torn, their bodies weak, their faces unrecognizable. As they entered, villagers gasped in shock. The girls who once left in pride had returned in shame. Their parents wept but embraced them, whispering, "No matter how far you go, home will always welcome you." From that day, Amina and Saad dedicated their lives to warning young girls of the dangers of chasing pleasure without wisdom. They became living lessons that not every light leads to greatness. Some lead only to darkness. Moral of the story: not all that glitters is gold.